And that's happening now. The images we're bringing you from Mombasa County, those of the swearing in of Hassan Joho, Governor Mombasa County. And as you can see there, the NASA principals are in attendance. Raila Odinga, Musalia Mudavadi, flanking Ali Hassan Joho as he gets sworn in. He was, of course, re-elected for a second term, his second and final term as Mombasa County Governor. County 001. And of interest about Ali Hassan Joho is that he has emulated his three other colleagues in rejecting the huge budget set for his swearing-in ceremony. His move comes, of course, hot on the heels of a similar move by Nairobi Governor Mike Sonko, Charity Ngilu, and Wahome Gakuru, who said they would rather direct these monies to more noble use. The swearing-in of Ali Hassan Joho just about to happen there on Mama Ngina Drive in Mombasa County, and we'll be following the proceedings there as well. We're joined in studio now for our studio discussion, our panel discussion, by Hezron Mugambi, who is a political analyst, as we continue to take a look at news shaping the day. And Hezron, just looking at Hassan Joho there, as we await the swearing-in of him as governor for a second term, he emulated three of his colleagues in rejecting the huge budget that was set for this swearing-in ceremony. What are you reading into that?
Thanks, Lillian, for having me. This is a good sign. It is a good sign that we need to use most of our resources, which we have, and they are not enough, to direct those resources to uplift the standards of living of our people. That is one. Two, it has been noted through many reports by the Auditor General and other reports that the money, the finances which are sent to the counties are not put into proper use for development activities and purposes. So I think this is a good sign from the incoming governors, and we only hope that this continues, because after this swearing in, there are so many other things which are going to happen, and the scrutiny which we have right now and the glamour associated with coming into office may not be there. So we hope that this continues, and that a lot of finances, a lot of money which is sent to the counties is used for uplifting the standards of living of the people in those counties, instead of using them for other activities like what we have seen the governors-elect refuse. And
as we move away from this inauguration, gentlemen, Hassan Joho is flanked there by the key NASA principals. We're seeing Musalia Mudavadi there, we're seeing Raila Odinga there. Is this a show of solidarity? Are we expecting to hear them perhaps touch a little bit on their feelings, particularly surrounding the election outcome? Stephen?
I think so. It's most likely that they will mention something. Of course, they have to be careful because the matter at hand is before the courts. But I'm certain they're not going to waste an opportunity such as this not to make commentary on the events.
I think, in my view, that this is the first time we are seeing the principals together in a while. I think one of the messages is already being passed in then standing together and saying, this is our man, we stand with him. We must always read that their appearance is an attempt to show that NASA is still holding together. That is already a form of communication. What they say after that, I think they will try and play up that NASA is still holding together. They'll try and play down the loss of Nairobi as a county. They'll try and show that they still have a hero in the Council of Governors. That's what they're likely to do. They might mention the case, but I don't think they'll dwell on that much.
And then again, they might not talk at all on anything to do with the election. They might just be there as a show of solidarity for their comrade.
True. Of course, Missouri loves company, and they feel that they are aggrieved party. And that kind of need for us coming together to show that you know, we are a aggrieved party, and we need that to support each other emotionally, and I think that's the message that they are trying to pass out there. But I also understand that Joho is also second in the pecking order as far as the party chairmanship is concerned. Of course, he's the vice chair, the first vice chair. The other one is Oparanya, and that says that is still attracting that kind of blessings and support from the party leader Raila, and that is also something to do with the party succession, of course, in the sense that while the ODM is actually has been perceived to be an odd man's game in terms of composition, the infusion of young leadership in terms of trying to make them come of age, I think is also a statement that perhaps they are trying to pass out there. Look, here we are are likely to pass out the baton, but here is one of the more favorable fellow who might take the baton from the party chair and run away with it. And
then again, Hezron, we see a significant number of the NASA brigade being conspicuously absent. We don't see Kalonzo Musyoka, we don't see Moses Wetangula, we don't see Isaac Ruto.
Yes, because I think, Lillian, this is more of an ODM affair. It is very strategic that, of course, they are at the inauguration of Ali Hassan Joho, who, as my colleague has just said, is the deputy in the party. So it is both strategic and it is both telling that here is one of our, those people who we depend on in the party, who is our bedrock, and strategically also because you remember the cases in the Supreme Court, and therefore it is one way of saying that we are together in this, although, as you said rightly, the other principles are not in this. So again, that serves to show that as much as the case has been fronted by NASA as a coalition, there are also undercurrents because of the political dispensation and the future, because as of now, if things remain the same members of the NASA coalition, the principals, may end up finding themselves running in different on different tickets, or joining in, or coalescing around different people. So already we can see the formations here that really this NASA was about ODM, and the main partner in this coalition is ODM.
Maybe, Lena, before it escapes me, I think I've not seen Governor Isaac Ruto coming out in front of the cameras to perhaps since it was defeated. I think he's still in shock, and maybe has not yet recovered fully to appear in front of the cameras, and because the expectations were very high, of course everybody was actually pointing that it was actually the likely taker of that seat, and therefore to me I think the beating is still in him, and maybe sooner is going to recover from that.
Yeah, and it's a wait and see.
Sure.
So as we move away from this conversation, remember once again, as earlier mentioned, in Kirinyaga, the governor-elect Anne Waiguru also being sworn in today. That's in Kirinyaga County. In Bomet County, Dr. Joyce Laboso will also be sworn in today. That's in Bomet County. Away from the swearing in and the inauguration ceremonies of the different governors that are happening today, lobbying for the top positions in parliamentary leadership has started in earnest, even as the MPs elect prepare to convene in the 12th Parliament on or before the 7th of September. Let's begin by looking at the leadership structure. And among the positions in contention, both in the National Assembly and in the Senate, are those of the speakers and their deputies, leaders of the majority and their deputies, leaders of minority and their deputies, majority whips and their deputies, and minority whips and their deputies. We know that Jubilee has a strong standing currently as we speak. So let's take a look at the leadership structure, beginning with the National Assembly. Brian,
sure.
Yeah, what we're likely to see there?
We are likely to see a lot of jostling for those positions, owing to the fact that every party would want to control matters business in the House. While Jubilee is actually priding to have the numbers, they are actually likely to find themselves in a situation where they should you know, be begging to have a situation where they have systems which are able to put them in checks and the balances, because a party which is actually popular in both houses is likely to be a rogue, you know, house business, in the sense that the systems to check their moves are very weak. And that's why we are lamenting actually the good old days when we had a parliamentary system where we could have a robust, you know, opposition side which would put the government of the day in checks and the balances. But this time round, we are only actually being subject to the peripheral aspect of actually a minority and a majority. And of course, a minority, strictly speaking, is the leader of the business opposition in that particular house. If you look at the just concluded parliament session, you realize that the strictly speaking leader of opposition was Francis Nyenze. What could he do in terms of actually, you know, trying to marshal a robust, vibrant opposition team within the house to ensure that they put Jubilee into task? That could not be seen. And therefore, while we are seeing some positions which are, you know, specifically going to the speaker position, both at lower and upper house, these are seats which perhaps will go to according to the whims of the executive. And I'll tell you, for instance, whoever is in good books with the president, especially in the Jubilee side, will take his day.
So yeah, and you say whoever is in good relationships, and we know that the incumbent speaker Justin Muturi and Aidan Duale, the majority leader, are in good standing with the top Jubilee party leadership. So are they likely to retain their seats? Yeah,
the scene is not likely to change much. For example, if I start from the county level of Nairobi, of course we are likely to see Beatrice Elachi of course taking the speaker position. At the national level, Muturi might be sacrificed at some point to maybe, you know, live to, you know, to massage some expectations of other quarters. But also at the Senate, I'm not likely to see Ekweduru actually, because of course we have to look at what did he bring on the table.
We'll be talking about the Senate, but let's first focus on the National Assembly. Before that, we're crossing over to Mombasa County, where the swearing in of Hassan Joho is just about to go on, or is currently ongoing. Let's take a look. We're going to be going back there very shortly. The swearing in of Hassan Joho, who will be serving the people of Mombasa County as governor for a second term, will be happening and is currently happening. That's on Mamangina Drive in Mombasa County. Brian, as you were closing?
Yeah, that's why I'm saying I do not see also Justin Muturi, you know, retaining his position, because President Kenyatta, as you heard before during the campaign period, he said that there are so many positions, and the people whom are perceived to have had a sort of potential fallout to the president are likely now to fit into that bill in terms of being brought to be actually massaged, politically speaking, in terms of the expectations. So the president has a balancing act to live to, and some of the people that he has to impress are the people whom were perceived to be so close to him, yet they lost. And then this is the time, and therefore this is the time now he has to, you know, give them something to smile about.
Steve, do you agree with Brian?
I don't necessarily agree with him. I know there's a lot of payback to do and so on, but I think in the positions of the Speaker of the House, you have to look at his capacity to control the House and also to push the government agenda through. And with a supermajority, of course, it makes it easier, but we've seen also in this country that parliamentarians, regardless of party, don't always vote together. So there is an opportunity for there to be a very engaged parliament. I don't know whether Muturi will retain his seat, but all that depends on the perceptions of members as well as his party and his boss on whether he did a good job or whether there's someone else who can be even more effective.
Mark, on the same.
there are two numbers that are very key in choosing who's going to be the next House Speaker. The first number is 233. Now that number is important because it's the number you need to be able to pass a constitutional amendment, and that means that you have to get extra votes from the NASA side. Now that tells you that there might be a balancing act in terms of picking someone who is able to convince the NASA side, sort of like how Marende was, how he was viewed as a bipartisan speaker. That's one, and that is important because remember, the two-thirds gender rule has not yet been met. It might call for very quickly the parliament to be able to amend the constitution. That might be one of their top priorities, getting into office. The second number that is very critical as well is the number of women in parliament. Okay, getting 117 women into that house is going to be the kitendawili of our time. Okay, and how that is addressed. So, in as much as there is political interest and political egos that need to be massaged, there is also the part where President Uhuru Kenyatta has an agenda to deliver to the Kenyan people. Now, that agenda might actually more inform who he chooses as speaker versus political egos to massage, because for him, he does not have a re-election.
We're talking about the two-thirds gender rule and the constitutional threshold not being met. And on your screens, what you're seeing right now is the swearing in of Ali Hassan Joho as Governor Mombasa County. He will be serving for his second and final term as Governor of Mombasa County, and that is the swearing in that's currently going on. He is flanked by NASA principals Raila Odinga and Musalia Mudavadi, who are also in attendance, and that is happening along Mamangina Drive in Mombasa County, and that is the swearing in as he prepares to lead the people of Mombasa County for a second term. Back to our studio discussion where we're talking about preparations to convene for MPs elected to convene in the 12th Parliament. To you, Hezron, the factor of the independence and how that is likely to tilt the favor for or against whoever will ultimately assume which position.
First of all, I think for me the most overriding factor in who assumes or gets which position, both in the Senate and in the National Assembly, has got to do with President Kenyatta's promise to Kenyans, and that is to say, the Jubilee coalition, or party, has a manifesto. This manifesto is what the president sought re-election on, and is what he wants to implement so that he has a legacy. And therefore, once he sets his eyes on picking on who is going to be a speaker or deputy speaker, both in the National Assembly and in the Senate, he has to think, and the party, about who is going to lead the discussions and the deliberations in both the Senate and Parliament in terms of ensuring that his manifesto is implemented. Number two, and most importantly also, we have to remember that as part of his legacy, there have been complaints that some regions, some areas in Kenya have been sidelined. And therefore, he will also look at how to ensure that those regions, those areas which feel like they have been sidelined in appointments in public service and institutions like Parliament and the Senate are also included, in the sense in which they will feel then they are included. And thirdly, remember that there is also the succession of 2022. And as much as we will say that that is not important because the president will not be seeking re-election, there are members of his party from the deputy president going down who will be setting their sights on the 2022 election, and therefore they will want to strategize in a manner to ensure that whoever gets into the shoes of those seats will also partially have that agenda.
That's right. Let's take a look at what's happening in Mombasa County, where Ali Hassan Joho is being sworn in, and that is currently ongoing. That is live. Those are live images that we're getting there. His deputy there getting sworn in, and that's Dr. William Kingi, who is being sworn in together with his running mate, his boss, Ali Hassan Joho. They will be working hand in hand to ensure that they continue with the work that they started, that Ali Hassan Joho started in Mombasa County. Of interest, gentlemen, is the fact that Ali Hassan Joho's second term will be deputized by a different deputy governor. We know that his relations with his previous deputy were sore, to say the least, after, of course, she ditched his party. Let's begin with you, or whoever, I mean, in whatever order, really, and look at how this working relationship is likely to play out. We know that Hazel had a lot of issues surrounding her working relationship with Ali Hassan Joho. Stephen?
I think, and as I've said earlier, that the relationship between the governor and the deputy governor is critical. It has to be a good relationship, a working relationship, and one that the deputy governor understands is a subordinate position. You cannot be having your own agenda behind the scenes, working against your own governor for any reason whatsoever. It's not expected by the people of your county, and it is inappropriate. I think the key thing will be understanding your role and doing what's really contributing and doing what really your governor expects you to do. There is no other way around it.
Joho picked Professor William Kingi as his running mate. Do you see this being a more friendly working relationship as opposed to what we saw with him and Hazel in his previous tenure?
I think you have to take into account that Joho, having been governor for the last 4.5 years, has experience, and I'm sure he was much more careful in who he chose as his running mate, simply because once bitten, twice shy. And then, of course, there is the agenda that we need to understand. I think Joho has a lot of ambition, and therefore I think he chose someone who is able to bolster his ambitions and who's able to bring in because if Joho fails to change Mombasa or to deliver a narrative of success in Mombasa, then his political fortunes in 2022 come into question. So his agenda in this particular term will be to show himself as the change candidate, as the progressive candidate. That is what he's pushing for, and his choice of running mate is very critical, comparing the professor to the D grade. You know?
Yeah, I think the choice also has to be determined by other factors such as succession factor. Of course, when you look at the capacity of his running mate or deputy, for that matter, I think it leads to that status that in the event or in the unlikely event that the governor is not there or is not able to discharge his duties, is actually the county is taken care or is in the safe hands of an equally capable leader. But woe unto those governors who are not putting this into factor, in the sense that some governors, of course, have not looked into the youth aspect or the youth factor, in the sense that when you are a governor in this kind of position, you are supposed actually to look out for somebody whom you can mentor, both politically and also at the same time have that capacity being grown to a situation where you can take that responsibility in the unlikely event that you are not there. So this one is actually a plus for Joho, and I do commend him. The other one, of course, is my governor in Nairobi. Of course, he has also done the same, because when you look at his number 2, of course, he's equally capable of actually taking Nairobi to the next level. Of course, the deputies, the challenge and the honor still remains with them, that they also have to familiarize themselves with Robert Greene's 48 laws of power, which says you should never outshine your master in any way, and therefore they have to work within their confines and ensure that they always depict their bosses as equally capable of delivering.
But as you talk about outshining your master, previous deputies have felt that their roles are not clearly defined, and therefore that is where the bone of contention has been. Case in point, Hazel Katana, who strongly felt that her role was not clearly defined. and that she most of the times found herself, for lack of a better word, idle?
I think that was a teething issue in the initial formation of the county operations, and when the County Act 2012 came into place, it clearly defined the roles of the DGs, and therefore after that we saw there was less frictions in terms of their relationship with their bosses. But again, of course, we cannot rule out issues of personalities. Of course, there are those who would want to see that they are doing something enough and positioning themselves in a position where they will be able to somehow or somewhat reach the top position. So we cannot rule out that one. But as far as the legal framework is concerned, Lillian, the County Act 2012 has laid it bare that the roles are clearly defined and they have nothing to grapple with.
Talking about the legal framework, Hezron, the governor-elect, before his swearing in, had rejected major involvement by the national government, saying that Mombasa County had the capacity to handle this swearing-in ceremony on its own. The friction that we've seen between Hassan Joho and the presidency in itself, by him going up in arms, being openly rude towards the presidency. How is this going to affect the devolved functions, and the fact that indeed we do know that the national government has to come in certain functions to assist in the running of counties, in particular Mombasa County?
Lillian, there is a sense in which one starts feeling that Hassan Joho was playing the kind of politics which you have just referred to, because he was playing to the public gallery for support, because
will he tone down now that the campaign season is over?
It is very likely, considering that he is now in the office. He has changed, as we have just said, his deputy, and who I think to all extent and purposes will serve his administration faithfully and be able to deliver on what he has promised. Otherwise, as one of my colleagues has said, it will, leave a wrong, so to speak, legacy in Mombasa. But it is likely that he's going to tone down. But again, remember, Ali Hassan Joho, we know him as a politician who is also extremely ambitious. His tenure ends after the 5 years. If he serves 5 years and then another 5 years, 10 years, that is all. So he's likely to look for ways of catapulting himself into the national politics. So if he still uses the same tactics and strategies which he has been using to ensure...
But he certainly hasn't started off to a good start by saying that Mombasa County has the capacity of organizing the swearing-in ceremony by itself. He's continuing with the same aggression and the same attitude that we've known him previously for. That
is exactly what I'm referring to by saying that if he continues with the same strategies like he's doing right now, then, and we know he's very ambitious, then he's more likely to be antagonistic to the national government, knowing very well that he also has ambitions for 2022 when he will leave the governorship position, and therefore he will want to cut a figure of somebody who has a strong backing from the coastal region and other areas. We are likely to see him now forge out to other areas and try to seek for support through the same strategies, like being defiant to the national government, and therefore cut himself a niche, knowing too well that the President Uhuru Kenyatta, will not be there in 2022, and therefore be able to work with friends, but be the first among equals in that sense.
And one of the comments that's coming in is, and this is in reaction to our conversation, is, governors, why are you creating a storm in a teacup? It's just a swearing-in ceremony. You have to be sworn in and gazetted by a state officer. You cannot be sworn in by an MCA. It's very unfortunate that the devolution in Kenya has fallen hostage to calls for militancy. You remember that Nanok had also said that indeed Kinjuri had no business whatsoever dictating to them what days their swearing-in ceremonies should be. So not just Mombasa County on its own, but looking at the Council of Governors and the rift there has been between the national government and the county government, and the fact that, for instance, when you see the health crisis across the country, some of these issues could have been better solved were there better camaraderie between these two bodies?
There are two elements that we need to understand. That number one, Jubilee has a majority of the governorships as we speak. So we expect that there will be a lot of mending of bridges between the presidency and governors. The truth is, in the first term of the Uhuru presidency, no one really knew how governors and the national government should work together. It was still forming in its initial stages, and there was a lot of storms. Secondly, let's understand that opposition governors will continue to be opposition governors for the most part. Why? Because of the ambitions that they hold. You see, a lot of the time we play to the politics called nikutukane ndo nijulikane. You understand? You see, if me and Brian fight, the blogs will not catch it. But if me and Lilian Muli fight today, then my profile and my Twitter followers will increase overnight. And that is what these storms are about. The reality of the matter is there can be no storm between the county governments and the national governments, because the national government is mandated by law to deliver funds and resources to county governments. Same to the county government, it's required by law to work with the national government. So the political goodwill might not be there because of the perceived animosity, but at the background, funds will still come. There's no way the national government will say, because I have a fight with Nanok, I will not release their money. I will hold on to them, to those resources for a time, because resources will be released at the same time. So governors have that leeway to play politics, but the reality of the matter is, whether they like it or not, they have to work with national government.
Absolutely, I do agree with him, of course, delving on Article 174, of course, of the Constitution, which talks about the objects of devolution. Of course, we have decentralized most of the services, and matters of physical affairs is no exception, and therefore, when you hear national government, has no good relationship with the county, it can only be at the political level. But when it comes to that physical, obligation, funds have to trickle down to the counties, and that one is anchored on the law. And therefore, but there's also the perception of some of the counties, how they, they handle their finances. Counties where the leaders or the governors are perceived to have frosty relationships with the top of the executive are likely to get more scrutiny. And that's on record from our previous, engagement from the last parliament, where governors, who have most of them coming from the from the opposition, were likely to attract the eye of the EACC and the other interrogators and auditors to understand how they have spent their monies. Save for maybe Mwangi Iria and maybe Machakos governor, but when you look at Machakos was an exceptional case, because his case was actually majorly on the way he procured the ambulances. But when it comes to physical discipline, physical prudence, this, I can tell you that whoever is not going to play, to the whims of the executive and, not trying to brush the executive in the wrong way, will always attract the wrath of the auditors. And trust me, in any financial expenditure, in any financial matter, there will always be that small discrepancy. How it is going to be picked by the media, how it's going to be exacerbated to another level, is a discussion for another day. But those are some of the areas that, the executive and the political party of the day or the government of the day will capitalize on to depict you as, have done something wrong in your part.
Talking about the issue of the county assembly and the frosty relationships that in the previous administration we saw between governors and the MCAs in certain counties, like for instance, you remember with the late Nderitu Gachagua. We also saw Speaker Susan Kihika almost bought out because of being attacked by the Senate at county level. Let's talk about the frosty relationships, and when you look at a place such as Bomet County, where Isaac Ruto is not coming in as governor, Joyce Laboso now taking over, those frosty relationships that have been experienced by governors and their MCAs, and how that ultimately affects the running of things within county level. Let's start with you, Mark.
My biggest question, just to enhance actually what you've just asked, is the independent governors, like the governor in Laikipia. How do you run a county when you don't have a single MCA to hold to your party? You know, you literally cannot threaten them because you can't de-whip them. You can't really control what the MCAs do. So who's going to be more governor, your MCAs or yourself? Because MCAs can actually just refuse, for example, to pass your finance bill for that year, and then you can't spend any money, and then your government is in limbo. Now the reality of the matter is this: we have to interrogate the cases where the MCAs were acting out of selfish need and greed, because that was actually a lot of the reasons why they even tried to impeach some of their governors, and where there was an actual issue where there was breach of law or breach of protocol on the part of the governor. Now this MCA position is a position that is very interesting, because the local authority transfer fund, the way it used to be there, does not exist. So an MCA does not have something to go back to his people and say, I'll build this little road using my fund. He doesn't have a fund. So the only arm they have is to push the governors to do what they want, and that's what they've been pushing. Now in the past, what they've pushed for is their allowances, their pocket money, travel allowance. They want to go to Israel to learn how the Israelis do that. But now our hope is that they will be pushing for the governor to implement what these MCAs promised at the elections, to implement agendas. If that is the case, then we expect a smoother running for the sake of the people. But if they continue with selfish interest, the governor is not doing what I want, then we are likely to face problems. But the governors who've been elected as independent, that is going to be a kizungumkuti for the ages.
And I beg your pardon, when I spoke about Susan Kihika, I meant she was bolting out of the county assembly, not the Senate. Of course, she's lobbying for the Senate position now. Brian, talking about the MCAs and the frosty relationships they've had with their bosses, and how this ultimately will affect the running of different counties where we have newcomers, and indeed where we have incumbents having been re-elected.
Yeah, I'll take an example of Makueni County, of course. Something that you have not mentioned, but yet is an historic, landmark in terms of our political happenings. You remember very well, Lillian, that Kivuda Kibwana, our governor in Makueni, could not work, could not execute his obligations. And that was actually something that was actually attributed mostly to the frosty relationship that he had with the MCAs. But I believe you me that out of all those 30 MCAs plus, only one came back. It was a clean broom that swept all that dust to the dustbins. And I think it's a new beginning. But again, we also need to understand the workings of the relationship between the executive and the legislature, the counties. While we want to see that independence and interdependence, we also we are pretty alive to the fact that the excesses of the executive have to be put into task. Now that's where rubber meets the road, because no executive would want to be, interrogated every day, every night, in terms of how they have been sticking to physical prudence. Now the dilemma is here. While most of the governors would want to have friendlier MCAs, but they have to be alive to the fact that these MCAs also have to expedite their mandate, or to act on their mandate in a manner which they are likely to be seen that they are also autonomous and exercising that independence. But how now to marry these two is where the other problem lies in the sense that we would want to see a governor who is actually delivering, at the same time who is actually being able to account for every penny that he has used in the county. Now, for instance, when it comes to those independent governors, I think we have a lacuna in the law, in the sense that we have not protected the governors enough, in the sense that we have not ring-fenced them watertight, in the sense that when MCAs feel like, doing away or getting rid of this governor who is independent, who does seem to have a political sort of support, then that person becomes so vulnerable that he can suffer for some issues that perhaps he would not have suffered for. And therefore, that's why we need to strengthen the aspect of devolution, cushion the governor further, and ensure that while we put more checks and balances into how he conducts himself, yet we also protect him in the sense that he is not so vulnerable to the MCAs, because these guys are mercenaries, most of them, guns for hire. Any little amount that would, trickle in their pocket will change their dynamics in the way they think.
Steve, I see you reacting to that, but honestly, when it comes to cushioning governors from impeachment, which we saw MCAs in the last tenure that just ended, actually humiliate governors, sometimes because some, like Brian rightly put it, had their own selfish interests.
Yeah, I think the most influential people in our country today are actually the MCAs. True. If those guys don't pass, or if those elected officials do not pass the county budget, the entire country comes to a standstill. I don't think they've realized yet just how powerful they are, and maybe they will after hearing this. But in the case of an independent governor that has a given political party in his county assembly, I think this is a real test at leadership, where you can influence people who are actually in a different party and get to move the county objectives forward. It's a working relationship that the governor has the burden of managing very well. And you manage through influence, in the sense that you influence people with your policies, your attitude, and also persuasion. Where do you marry your objectives to the MCA? And all this should be homogeneous, really, because the people, the MCAs are representing the various wards, and therefore are representing the people of your county. So there shouldn't be that jesting. But of course we know people wanted to travel for the first time. They wanted to get their commissions, if you will, or allowances through these trips. It's cheaper to bring a teacher than to take a whole county assembly.
But it's not as lucrative a position anymore.
Yeah,
and therefore we know there are many who shied away from it after the Sarah Serem Gazette notice. Let's hear from you, Hezron.
Lillian, I think we are in for very interesting times. One, because there are counties which have, as we have said, which have independent governors, and of course majority of MCAs from a certain party or parties. Number two, we have situations where we have governors from certain parties, but within the county assembly we will have, different pockets of elected representatives from different parties, including independent MCAs. We have more independent MCAs right now than we had in the counties last time. So really it will be a question of trying to balance on the part of the governor on how to take the county forward, looking at personal interests and looking at county interests, which are fronted here by the executive. So as much as we know that when the new constitution came in, the clamor and the argument was that due to what was happening in the counties in the last 4 years or 5 years, it has been said that actually corruption was actually devolved to the counties, and therefore it is incumbent upon governors to ensure that they form strong committees to work on county projects, to work on how to move the counties forward, considering all those differences of opinion of parties, because in some instances parties would also want to ensure that they front their manifesto through those counties. You realize that before even these elections, there were issues, and we had issues like, we have opposition counties, and some of us have just said opposition counties, then we have, government-leaning counties, in the sense in which those governors were from the ruling party and the opposition party. So there will be so many issues to balance, on the part of the governor, to ensure that while harmony exists between the executive in the county and the legislature, to ensure that everything runs smoothly, there will be so many issues to deal with.
Right.
Even remember that the national government as well will also be trying to work with the counties to ensure that everything runs well.
And we are now signing out. I'll get your parting remarks, gentlemen, on this topic, the swearing in of Hassan Joho and his deputy. has just happened on Mamangina Drive in Mombasa County. Hassan Joho leading the people of Mombasa County for another 5 years with a new deputy this time round, William Kingi. And we're getting your parting remarks, not just on the swearing in of Hassan Joho, Brian, but also on devolution and whether we will actually see better performance this time round from the governors that are spread across the 47 counties.
Sure. Just want to borrow from what my colleague has delved in terms of the performance of the county assemblies, and I want to tell him that something that Mark mentioned in terms of devolving corruption, I think we also have to be very sensitive to these humans called the MCAs. Why their roles are so defined in the Constitution that they have the oversight role in terms of putting checks and the balance to the legislature, policy making in terms of you know, passing the bills and so on and so on. But when you look at the release that was given out by Sarasarem the other day in terms of reviewed salaries, I think I do want to pity and I want to, you know, sympathize with them, Lilian, because somebody in the stature of an MCA earning 165,000, to me, I think I saw it being on the lower level. And I think there is need also
but
to
you do know that she also specifically cut down on allowances, which were extravagant to say the least. These guys were getting sitting allowances, they were getting entertainment allowances for traveling for their many retreats across the country. So she was very, very specific in just where she was making the pay cut.
I think she also need to align these salaries further, because the discrepancy between a member of parliament and the MC is so huge that I can't get the words to justify this as a person. And therefore, while we want not to devolve, you know, corruption further, we also need to be sensitive to these people as well. But I also want to say, to correct an anomaly that you have said, that governors need to come up with good committees which will be able to deliver. I want to just pinpoint or bring into speed that county executives, governors do not come up with committees, but they are normally provided by within the legislative framework of the House. But as I sign out on this one, if you may allow me, Lilian, I think devolution is just to say with us, and this is the best news that should have happened to us as a country. And I have happened to have traveled to counties which were at the peripheral part of this country, the northern frontier, Wajir, Marsabit, and if you go there and compare to how I used to find those counties in those days, Leland, I think you can see a paradigm shift in terms of how devolution has actually worked in those counties. And therefore, the honor still remains with us as stakeholders to put, you know, more pressure to the systems to ensure that they live up to that billing of protecting and ring-fencing the concept of devolution to live up to its billing. I would thank God.
Mark, has devolution worked for you? Do we expect to see even more development across the counties?
One, for sure, devolution has worked. It has worked in a very big way, in the sense that if you looked at even the intensity with which people are voting for the governor's position, you will understand that it became a valuable position, and that means that it has had a direct impact on the people. Now, the measure of that impact is what we are questioning. But remember, we did not have a standard by which to measure that before. Now we do. Now we have a standard to measure. And what is expected is within this next 5 years is that the committees that I think Hez was mentioning there are actually the committees, the county executive committees, what you'd call the cabinet of the governor. Now, these cabinets are the ones who implement the agenda of the governor. Now, the reality of the matter is this 5 years, it will be about how many governors are able to implement that. And the truth is, and the beauty about this election, is the Kenyan people have chosen and said, if you don't deliver, we will kick you out. And they even told the principals of the major parties, don't come and tell us who to vote for. We will choose who we want. And we've seen a lot of governors go home. Now, the reality of the matter is that is good news for Kenyans, because then we are taking charge of our own destinies in our own counties.
And Steve?
Yeah, one of the things that we saw the last time around is that there were groups of politicians claiming to protect devolution. Devolution is embedded in the Constitution. Nobody can claim to be protecting it. It is there and it is here to stay. The strengthening is a different thing altogether. But the other thing is, of course, the message is very clear, just as you've said, that people have lost their seats because of performance, questions of their integrity, etc. MCAs also, many of them are new, and therefore they have a good measuring rod by which to go by, that if you don't perform, you'll be kicked out. The other thing I would recommend to MCAs and the like is that don't waste time trying to impeach your governor. Spend your time implementing the projects that affect the people in your county, because we have seen with Wambora, impeached I think twice or thrice, and the guy survived and he's back as a governor. So don't waste your time playing that game. Also, we wish our governors the best, because if they do well in any county, it is good for our country as a whole.
Gentlemen, I thank you very much for your time. We're coming to the top of the hour here on Citizen Extra. Remember, we continue with Swahili Citizen Extra very shortly with Swale Mdoe. I've been joined in studio by Hezron Mugambi, who is a political analyst, Brian Mutia, governance analyst, Mark Bichache. I forget. I'm sorry about that, communication strategist, and of course with us as well is Stephen Kekonyo. Thank you very much for your time in studio, gentlemen. We are back with more on Citizen Extra. Stay tuned.